Good afternoon, everyone. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Greg Beischer from Alaska Energy Metals. This conversation is particularly exciting to me because of the unique aspects of Alaska Energy Metals projects. What stands out to me, and I believe it will to you too, is Greg's long-term involvement with this project, spanning several decades. His commitment and the extensive work done in this field add a layer of depth and credibility that's not often seen in the junior markets. A key point that really caught my attention during our discussion was the significant investment made in drilling these properties over the years. We're talking north of $30 million has been spent drilling out this project before it ended up in this company's hands. This is not your average grassroots exploration initiative. Instead, it's a well-developed venture with a solid foundation, making it much more than just an exploratory drilling company. Now, looking back to the 1990s when Inco was exploring this project, the economic viability wasn't clear. However, fast forward to today with the world transitioning to electric vehicles and the demand for nickel, especially cleaner nickel, has skyrocketed. These projects are now incredibly appealing, not just to automakers, but to any company in need of more nickel that cares about the environment. For those who've been following our website, The Deep Dive, or our channel, you'll be aware of the significant differences between nickel sulfide projects in regions like Canada and the US versus the laterite nickel projects in places like Indonesia, especially concerning their environmental impact. Given the global shift towards cleaner energy, I believe these projects, like the one Greg is going to talk about today, stand a great chance of progressing to development stages. All right, everyone, I think that I've said enough. Enjoy the interview. Greg, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me back on your show, Steve. Glad to be here.
So I want to start off with the nickel market. I assume you're talking to at least having soft conversations with various buyers or end users of nickel. What's your assessment right now of what's happening in the nickel market? And maybe we can get into a little bit of the difference between some of the sulfide deposits that we have in North America versus some of the laterite type projects that are happening in places like Indonesia.
Sure. Well, the price of nickel right now is kind of soft, and the projections for the next years aren't even that good. And the main reason, so far as I understand it, is that in Indonesia, which produces the most nickel in the world and has the capacity to ramp up their production, is meeting all the demand right now, even though the projections for demand in the coming years are enormous. You keep seeing things like we're going to need 4 or 5 times more nickel than the world is currently producing. So I'm a bit perplexed. But the other aspect is that Indonesian nickel is what we call laterite nickel. It forms in a different way than the nickel we mine in the northern hemisphere, sulfide nickel. And the unfortunate part is that Chinese control a lot of that Indonesian production, and those countries don't share our North American values on environmental protection, human rights, workforce rights, that sort of thing. And so the unfortunate part is that Indonesian coal, which is refined largely by burning coal to smelt it, puts a lot of carbon in the air, and it counteracts the whole idea of driving electric cars to help save the atmosphere. So I think North American and European consumers of nickel need to move away from Indonesian nickel. It really is just better in our backyard, where we do have excellent world-class environmental and human rights regulations.
So I think that there's a really good question there in terms of we've got this cheaper source of nickel that's largely being used in all the electric vehicles in places like China. It's really hard on the environment. And then we've got cleaner sources of nickel that's going to be more expensive to get out of the ground. But if the end goal of switching to electric vehicles is reducing carbon, that's clearly the better option. So I think that the question that I'm kind of left with is, when it comes to these two types of nickels, is there really going to be an effort on the government's part to try to force the hand of manufacturers to use the cleaner type of nickel?
I think that force is already underway. The government is offering incentives, rebates to purchase electric vehicles, for example, but they're demanding that the nickel come at least from free trade countries. So that's a start. Free trade countries are generally more advanced in their environmental regulation. And in the case of the United States, it's fortunate because half of its nickel supply comes from Canada, good neighbor. But I also know that Canada is building electric vehicle battery plants all over the eastern provinces. So I'm not so sure that all that great nickel ore from Voisey's Bay and Sudbury and Thompson, Manitoba is going to end up in the United States anymore.
So, Greg, I want to get into your background a little bit, because a lot of times in the junior markets, we see these deals put together and there's kind of a rent-a-CEO type person who gets involved with a project. They maybe, they did some consulting work as a geologist, and the brokers or people behind the deal, they don't really necessarily care that much. They just want somebody who's going to take that C title. I know that in this case with Alaska Energy Metals, that is not the story here remotely. So maybe you could walk our audience through your background specifically in Alaska and with nickel.
Yeah, I agree, Steve. I've seen, though, a lot of people make a lot of money on what I sort of term as fad commodities, whether it's lithium or rare earth elements or graphite. Early movers do seem to make a lot of money. So I can't really blame them for that. But nickel, let's face it, it's a base metal. It's a basic part of our society, used in stainless steel, aeronautics, everything like that. And now it's used in electric vehicle and other battery storage. So it's got a huge new demand. But yeah, I'm no stranger to nickel exploration and development, because I spent, the whole early part of my career, 15 years with Inco, at the time, the biggest nickel mining company in the world. And it was a fantastic education working for that company. They really worked on developing their employees. And so I learned a lot about the geology of nickel deposits. And the interesting thing about nickel is that it really only occurs in very specific types of rocks that aren't well distributed over the surface of the earth. Like, for example, with lithium, now that we're really looking hard for it as an industry, well, we're finding it in lots of different places. Gold occurs in lots of different geologic environments, but nickel is very specific in where it can occur. And those rocks are not common rocks. So the search space for nickel is limited. And in the US, it's very limited.
So I want to get into Alaska Energy Metals. For our audience that are new to the story, what can you tell us about the company from a high level perspective?
Sure. Well, we've really just started it less than a year ago. I've been living and exploring all over Alaska for 30 years, ever since Inco moved me here to explore this exact same project. I was so fortunate to be able to recover the mineral rights to the same project that brought me here all those years ago. But for last 15 years, I ran Millrock Resources, a public company that was an early stage generator of projects, exploration projects. But then when I got the chance to reacquire nickel, I said, this is it. We've got to focus all our effort on this project, because I know the nickel's there. There's been enough drilling historically, some of which I did myself back in the 90s when we first discovered the nickel there, that the nickel's there. It's probably a very, very large deposit, but not a high concentration, but very homogeneous, regular. Every time a hole is drilled into it, it comes back with almost the same concentration. And so that's very encouraging. Big mining companies love homogeneous deposits, ones that they can see could be mined for decades with the same concentration of metal with just about every scoop that they take from the ground.
Now, when you guys were drilling this project out in the 90s, I assume that the grades that you were hitting, although encouraging, they weren't necessarily high enough to consider it as a potential production asset. Whereas today, because of electric vehicles, we're now looking at these projects that weren't considered economical, say in the 90s, and now we're looking at them with a different lens and saying, okay, maybe this does make sense. So two takeaways from that is that one, we've got this somebody else who spent a ton of money on drilling before it even ended up in your hands. And then secondly, we have this opportunity where there still could be some larger drill results to come, because I assume you guys weren't drilling this out in the 90s looking for 0.3% nickel.
No, that's exactly right, Steve. We were very intrigued by what we drilled into back in the 90s, this continuous, homogeneous, lower grade material, but the target at the time was massive sulfides, rich sulfide ores that would grade 2 or 3%, like at Norilsk in Russia. There's geologic parallels here to Norilsk, and that's what we were after then. And we didn't discover it, but it's not to say that it's not there waiting to be discovered, the roots of the system that would have those high grades. And so we're definitely keeping that in mind as we explore, because that would be a complete a game changer. But I do feel that what we're delineating right now, though not high grade, in the coming demand scenario for nickel certainly will be an ore body, something that could be economically extracted. So, one of the great things is that our company was able to buy all of that historical information. It's over $30 million worth of exploration work that now we don't have to spend our shareholders' money on. So all the basic exploration work's being done. Now it's just a matter of drilling. So every dollar that people invest in our company goes directly, almost exclusively to drilling. So it's very efficient use of the capital and maximizes the chance that we're going to make that great big discovery of high grade, and that we can efficiently block out the bulk tonnage resource.
So you guys announced some drill results in December. One hole that caught my eye, over 300 meters of 0.34% nickel equivalent. What can you tell us about the drill results you guys put out recently in 2023, and how those sort of lined up with your expectations for your drill program?
Yeah, we drilled 8 holes through the course of the summer on a grid style pattern so that we could block out the mineralization. And every single hole came back just as anticipated, because all the historical drilling, as I mentioned, is very homogeneous. It seems like wherever we drill through this mineralized layer of magmatic rock, it has the same or similar concentration of metals. You mentioned 0.35% nickel equivalent. So that's the value of the nickel, which is the dominant contributor to the value, but it's also got accessory amounts of copper, cobalt, platinum, and palladium, which really helps with the value of the minerals in the rock. So all 8 holes, exactly what we expected. And you also mentioned over 300 meters drilled intersection, and all 7 of the 8 holes came back with greater than 300 meters thickness. This is a big, thick deposit. And that's the true width. The strata dips at about 45 degrees from the horizontal. And so if you drill a hole perpendicular through that strata, it comes out to over 300 meters true width. And the dip is exceptionally favorable too if you're to develop an open pit mine. It's like the perfect configuration for an open pit mine. So we're very pleased with the drill results that we've got. Is exactly in line with what we expected.
So another thing that I find really fascinating here is you guys raised money during a time when it was really challenging to raise money. The 2023 was not a good year for junior mining companies. In fact, I can tell you a whole bunch of stories of companies that I've invested in that are really kind of struggling to figure out paths to move forward. And here you guys announced some pretty big raises. I'm curious, when you talk to these institutional investors or people who maybe high net worth individuals who have the ability to write big checks, what is it that they're excited about? What are the kind of questions that they're asking you that made them decide that they wanted to move forward with investing in this project?
Well, I think it all comes down to connections, Steve. And, for myself, I'm a geologist at heart, a technical person, but, I can't do my technical work without the money. And I was very fortunate to meet a group from Vancouver, Canada, named Commodity Partners that really introduced me to the right people that maybe are contrarians, maybe see the potential of the nickel market going forward and have the wherewithal to write big checks even in a down market, or preferably in a down market at a low price, knowing that we could be on the verge of the perfect wave of nickel demand, nickel price increase, and a big resource right in hand. And so 2 or 3 years from now, I can see, and maybe those investors could see that they would make great gains on their initial investment. So, for the right project, when you meet the right people, a down market can be the best of times. And really, it is the best of times to be investing in junior explorers, especially good ones that have the staying power to make it back into the bull markets. And I've been around for quite a few of them at this point. And, when times are good in our business, they're fantastic. Everybody can make a lot of money, but now's the time to be buying the shares.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to come across as overly promotional here, but when I sort of look at the different battery metal stories out there that you can play, I'm not quite as bullish on lithium as I know a lot of people are. My take on it is that there is tons of lithium in the world, and there's lots of exploration companies looking for it, and really it doesn't take a whole lot of projects to come online to meet the demand. But nickel is just as important in most electric vehicle battery designs that I've seen. And there's just not a lot of nickel companies out there. I remember chatting with a well-known investor who was investing in CNC, Canada Nickel, and him saying to me, name the nickel companies that are out there that you can invest in. And I think that that's a really important thing in terms of, for me, when I look at junior mining stocks that I want to be in, is I don't want to be in a crowded space. There's just you got a finite amount of capital that feels like it's chasing an infinite number of deals. So when I look at nickel, I think to me it's just as important as lithium, but there's just not as many opportunities out there.
I think that's a really good point. I think Canada Nickel is a good analogy company for Alaska Energy Metals. Our deposits are very similar in terms of their style, geologic style, their mineralogy, and probably size. I mean, they're several years ahead of us, well into the feasibility stage at this point, where we're really just getting started. But I think we're going to catch up to them in terms of the contained metal in the deposit really quickly. And, I look at their market cap currently, $160, $170 million. It was peaked at around $400 million. So I think with the right series of market events, and we keep producing the results that we have so far, that investors can look forward to it. And there is very few to choose from. There's becoming more and more nickel exploration companies. Many of them are going after the high grade deposits, and I wish them good luck. And maybe someone will find another Voisey's Bay and repeat the success of diamond fields. But I just know, as a nickel exploration geologist, how rare those major massive sulfide discoveries are. We might make one at Nikolai, and we're definitely going to be trying. But we're going to rely, first of all, on the bulk tonnage, because we know it's there. We can see it. We're drilling it off.
Do you think that there's another Voisey's Bay out there waiting to be discovered?
There absolutely could be. It's geologically permissive. And as I mentioned, that's why I was sent up here to this project 30 years ago, because of those similarities to the Norilsk area of Russia, where there's such spectacular, rich, massive sulfide nickel deposits.
So I also want to ask you about, you guys had a former senator and mayor of Anchorage, Mark Begich, join the team. How'd that happen? How did Mark get involved?
Yeah, I was really glad when Mark agreed to join our board after I asked him. I've known Mark for a long time, from the times when he was, at the time he was the mayor. And, he's, that's a great thing about living in Alaska. I mean, there's only 700,000 of us, so you can know your politicians personally if you make the effort, and I do, and so I got to know Mark, and I liked him, and he's probably on the left of center. I'm maybe a bit on the right of center, but he clearly understands resource development in our state and how important it is for our state. We're a wealthy state in Alaska, primarily because of the oil industry. And he's championed oil productions when he was senator, and the interests of Alaskans. But I think, like me, he realizes that Alaska generally can be a huge wealth, a huge reservoir of metal resources that are crucial to an expansion into electrical energy. So I think it's great to have a person with that kind of depth of understanding of everything that goes into making Alaska succeed. And I think he'll provide us with great direction and advice as the project advances.
Do you think that we could see government funding work its way into some of these exploration companies in terms of trying to move projects forward? And what types of projects do you think the government would be looking at putting money into?
Yeah, they are through the Defense Production Act. The U.S. Department of Defense is evaluating projects in which to place grant funding to help them along, and the mining industry has already benefited from that. The Talon nickel deposit in Minnesota got a great big grant. Graphite One right here in Alaska, with an excellent graphite deposit on the west coast of Alaska, got a big grant. I mean, tens of millions of dollars to do a feasibility study. So certainly our company has applied for such grants. We're in the queue. We've made it over the first hurdle, and it's possible that we'll be awarded a grant as well. And that would be great capital to bring to the project. And I think it'd be a good endorsement of the project as well.
All right. So last question for you. If any investors or potential investors are watching this and they kind of want to watch the company for 2024, what should they be watching out for in 2024 in terms of milestones and timelines, and what do they consider a successful 2024 to look like?
Sure thing. Well, we've just a few weeks ago received all the results from our drilling campaign that was done last summer. So that means now we crunch all those numbers, and in maximum of 60 days from now, we'll publish an update to our resource calculation, which, if I was to guess, would more or less double the amount of nickel that we know is in the ground so far, or defined by drilling. And so there'll be several billion pounds of nickel documented in a resource, and that should improve our share price. I mean, that's a very substantial deposit of nickel. So look forward to that in the next 60 days. Additionally, we'll have results of the first bench scale testing of recoveries, and so we've got to make sure We know that the nickel's in the ground now, but we've got to make sure that we can capture that nickel out of the rock. And so the first testing is underway, and those results should be published in April or May. And then before that, we'll be off to the races on the next drilling program, which we intend to be pretty aggressive. And if those historical grades hold up, then we're going to have a very large deposit on our hands that'll capture, I think, the interest of every major mining company in the world.
Well, Greg, thanks for hopping on here today. I'm very interested in this story. We're obviously long, and I hope you keep coming on here in the future, because I think that this is one of the most exciting stories in the Canadian junior markets right now. So I commend you for all your hard work, and I look forward to seeing what you guys can do in 2024.
Thanks, Steve. I think we've made great progress for the first 9 months of operation, and I think we're going to do the same again this coming year. It's an exciting time.
All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this interview, please smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Also, let us know what you think in the comments section. Thanks, everyone.